Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Monday, February 16th, 2026, and today we are taking a trip out to the West Coast.
We are, specifically to Langford, British Columbia.
Exactly. Now, usually when we talk about Langford, we're talking about, boom times. Fastest growing city, cranes everywhere, new businesses popping up. But today, we are looking at the hangover.
That is a very polite way of putting it. If you were to drive down the Peatt and Sunderland corridor in Langford right now, literally today, you wouldn't think Boomtown.
Yeah.
You'd probably think you took a wrong turn into a disaster zone.
It is so visually striking and not in a good way. I was looking at the photos in the source material this morning. We're talking massive open excavation pits that look like, craters on the moon.
Yeah.
You've got homes that were demolished 3 years ago that are just sitting there. Piles of rubble, hazard notices taped to fences. It looks like a construction site where everyone just vanished.
It looks that way because effectively that's what happened. But we aren't here just to critique the, aesthetics of a construction site. This is a story about the cost of speed.
Right.
We have a stack of documents here, engineering reports from WSP Canada, council meeting minutes, legal filings that paint a really, really worrying picture. It's a case study on what happens when a municipality prioritizes rapid growth over regulatory oversight.
And there's a ticking clock attached to this deep dive, right? This isn't just history. It's happening right now.
Absolutely. There's a massive deadline looming on February 25th.
That's next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, for one of the key developers involved. So this is unfolding in real time. We're going to unpack the specific engineering failures, the web of interconnected companies behind them, and a major pivot in how the city is finally trying to hold them accountable.
Okay, let's get into the dirt, literally. Let's start with the project that's causing the most immediate alarm. It's ironically called The Scene.
The Scene. It sounds like a hip nightclub, doesn't it?
It really does.
But it's actually a stalled development at 2748 Peatt Road and 2745 Scaife Road. Back in 2022, this was approved to be the jewel of Langford's new downtown.
Right, 2 towers.
2 towers, 18 and 24 stories. It was part of this huge push to make Langford a modern city.
And for context, Langford has been trying to shift from, a suburban bedroom community to a high-density urban center. So they approved this massive project. They dig the hole in early 2023. They put up the shoring walls, and then what?
Nothing. Silence. For nearly 2 years, the site just sat there. But here's the insight that really matters for anyone interested in, say, urban planning or real estate.
Yeah.
It's not just that the project stopped. It's the narrative that was spun while it was stopped.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in September 2025, while the site was basically a ghost town, the Scene team sent out an email to buyers and interested parties.
Okay.
And they claimed they were in full-scale construction.
Full-scale construction.
While the pit was empty. Exactly. The sources suggest that claim bore absolutely no resemblance to reality. But the deception isn't even the scariest part. Because the project was stalled for so long, the city finally hired an independent engineering firm, WSP Canada, to audit the site. They wanted to know if that pit was safe.
And I'm guessing, since we're doing this deep dive, the answer was no.
The answer was a definitive no. WSP found a significant risk of what's technically called slouging.
Slouging. Okay, for those of us who aren't geotechnical engineers, can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. Think of it like the soil losing its cohesion and just sliding away from the retaining wall.
Like a slow-motion landslide.
Exactly. Because the site has been exposed to the elements, rain, wind, weathering, for so long, with the actual building being constructed to hold things up, the earth is starting to give way.
That sounds bad enough on its own. But looking at the map, this isn't just a hole in the middle of a field.
No, and that is the critical factor here. This southern retaining wall, the one at risk of slouging, is pressed right up against a neighboring strata properties road.
So the access road for an existing apartment building.
The only access road where people live. Yes.
So if the wall goes, the road goes.
Effectively, yes. WSP's report was categorical. They recommended that heavy vehicles cannot safely use that road until this is remediated.
And when they say heavy vehicles, they're not just talking about moving vans.
No, or garbage trucks. They specifically flagged fire trucks.
Whoa. Let's just pause on that for a second. Because a developer dug a hole and then walked away for 2 years, the residents in the building next door have effectively lost their emergency access.
That is the reality. If there is a fire at that strata today, a standard heavy fire truck cannot safely drive to their front door because the ground might literally give way beneath it.
That moves this from an eyesore or a bad investment to a massive public safety liability.
Huge.
How did the city react? I know Langford has a reputation for being pretty cozy with developers.
Historically, yes. But we're seeing a fascinating pivot here. The current administration, under Mayor Goodmanson, didn't just send a polite email asking for an update. They went nuclear.
Nuclear how?
First, they bypassed the developer entirely and went straight to the neighbors. Mayor Goodmanson and his staff personally delivered warning letters to 17 surrounding property owners, explaining the risk.
There's no hiding it.
Zero. They wanted to make sure the residents knew exactly what was happening.
That is aggressive transparency.
It is. And then they issued a remedial action order.
Explain that mechanism. Is that just a fine, a ticket? What is that?
It's much, much stronger. A remedial action order is a statutory tool under the community charter. It gives the property owner, in this case the developers, Avandra and Jagpal, a hard, legally binding deadline.
And that deadline is?
Noon on February 25, 2026, to mobilize and start fixing that wall.
And if they don't?
If they miss that deadline, the city has the legal authority to enter the private land, hire their own contractors to do the work, and then bill the developer for every single cent.
What if the developer just refuses to pay the bill?
It usually gets added to the property taxes. And if property taxes aren't paid, the city can eventually sell the land to recover the costs. It's the ultimate put up or shut up move.
Wow.
The mayor was very clear in the council meeting. He said residents shouldn't be holding the risk while developers speculate on land values.
I think this feels like a very specific reaction to a specific bad actor. But looking at our source map, the scene isn't an isolated case, is it? It seems to be part of a bigger pattern.
That's where this deep dive gets really interesting. When you start pulling at the threads of these stalled projects in Langford, you realize it's a very small world. You see the same names popping up over and over again on different failed sites.
Okay, I love a good conspiracy board. Connect the dots for us. Who are the players?
It's less of a conspiracy and more of a web of interconnected incompetence. At the center of the scene, you have a company called Avantra Developments.
Avantra, got it.
They acted as the development and marketing arm. But Avantra also managed another massive stalled project called Langford Gateway.
Okay, so one management company, two major stalls. What about the actual owners?
The owner of the scene is a White Rock-based company called Jagpal Development.
Yeah.
Now, Jagpal is also the entity behind a different project called Dunford Crossing.
Dunford Crossing.
This was supposed to be the tallest project in the West Shore, 29 stories.
Supposed to be. I sense a theme here.
Currently, Dunford Crossing consists of 9 vacant, dilapidated buildings. In October 2025, the city declared it a nuisance property.
A nuisance property?
Yeah, we're talking graffiti, illegal dumping, broken windows, trespassing. It's just a blight on the neighborhood.
So Jagpal has a history of leaving sites to rot. But let's go back to that other project Avantra managed, Langford Gateway. Who owns that one?
That is owned by the Centera Group, run by a CEO named Bob Frazier. And this is where the lack of vetting in Langford's past really becomes genuinely shocking.
How so?
The Gateway project at Arncote, Peatt, and Sunderland has been stalled since 2021.
2021, that's 5 years of nothing.
Worse than nothing. While the site was inactive, the developer demolished a house on the property but didn't clean it up.
Oh no.
They left piles of debris wood, metal, insulation exposed to the elements. An environmental assessment found asbestos and lead paint in that rubble.
Just sitting in the open air, next to people's homes.
For months, neighbors reported rodent infestations, dust blowing into their yards. It was hazardous waste. The city issued 25 separate fines for the condition of the property.
25 fines. Did they pay them?
They paid the first 3, then radio silence. They just ignored the city. But here's the kicker about Centera and Bob Frazier. While this was happening, while the site was a toxic mess, the company was actively marketing the project to private investors.
Trying to raise capital on a toxic site.
Exactly. But there's more.
Of course there is.
While Centera was pitching this massive project, CEO Bob Frazier had active arrest warrants in Kelowna.
Wait, back up. Arrest warrants.
Yes. For unpaid contractors on a completely different project. So you have a developer with arrest warrants, defaulting on mortgages, leaving asbestos in a residential neighborhood, and yet the project had been approved.
That raises a huge question. How does a city not check if the guy building the tallest tower in town is wanted by the law? That seems like due diligence 101.
And that brings us to the core thesis of this episode, institutional maturity. To understand why this is all happening now, you have to understand where Langford came from.
You're talking about the dog patch days.
Right. For decades, Langford was derisively known as Dog Patch. It had no tax base, no industry. It was where you went for cheap rent and dirt biking.
And then came Stu Young.
Then came Stu Young. He was the mayor for nearly 30 years.
And to be fair to the sources, he transformed the place. He brought in the big box stores, Costco, Home Depot. He kept taxes incredibly low. He built a city out of nothing.
He did. Absolutely. But his philosophy was, run the city like a business. And speed was the metric of success. We have reports of council agendas that were 200 pages long being cleared in 15 minutes.
15 minutes? You can't even read the headers of a 200-page document in 15 minutes.
Exactly. It was a rubber stamp culture.
Mm-hmm.
If a developer had a problem, they didn't go through a formal planning review. They went straight to the mayor's office.
And that works, I guess, when you're building a Costco in a flat, empty field. It's a simple box. You want to get it open. Fine.
Fine. But we aren't talking about big box stores anymore. We're talking about high-rise residential towers on complex water tables.
Precisely. The complexity of the engineering skyrocketed. We're talking 24-story towers over aquifers, but the regulatory oversight stayed in small-town mode.
The institutions just didn't mature at the same pace as the skyline. And we have a very dark precedent for what happens when you ignore that gap.
You're referring to the Danbrook one story?
Yes. Now known as Ridgeview Place. This is the ghost that haunts every decision the current council makes. This wasn't a hole in the ground. It was a finished concrete high-rise. People were living in it.
And it failed.
Catastrophically.
Yeah.
Back in 2017, city staff actually noticed that the building plans were missing crucial structural details. But, and this is the speed over safety mindset in action, they issued the permit anyway.
Conditional on getting the info later?
Conditional on getting that info later.
Which they never got.
They never verified it. They granted occupancy. Then, in 2019, an independent structural engineer raised the alarm about seismic safety. The regulatory body notified the city.
Okay, so the city knew there was a problem.
They knew. And here is the part that is hard to believe. After knowing about the investigation, the city issued a comfort letter to a potential buyer, Centurion, saying the building was compliant.
Wait, they vouched for a building they knew was under investigation for potentially falling down.
That is the allegation in the ongoing lawsuits. The result was that just before Christmas 2019, the building had to be evacuated.
Oh, man.
Families were thrown out of their homes, it was remediated, reoccupied, and then in April 2023, evacuated again because the remediation was deficient. It sits empty today.
That is an absolute nightmare.
It is, and that context changes everything regarding the scene. The current council isn't just being difficult about a retaining wall, they are terrified of another Danbrook one.
They're seeing the same pattern.
The exact same pattern. Speed, missing details, promises instead of proof, and they are slamming on the brakes.
So let's talk about that shift. We've gone from the Stu Young system of fast approvals to the Good Manson era. How are they handling things differently?
It's a complete 180-degree turn. Mayor Goodmanson and the new council are effectively saying the party is over. No more handshake deals, no more conditional permits for critical structural items.
And independent peer reviews?
Yes. Like hiring WSP to check the pit instead of just trusting the developer's word.
But this shift is painful. It's got to be messy.
It's incredibly messy. You have Councilor Yakucha stating publicly, "I see this as almost our last chance to get this right." He's worried that if they don't fix these institutions now, the public will lose faith in density entirely.
That makes sense. If every tower ends in a lawsuit or a collapse, people are going to stop letting you build towers.
It's an existential crisis for the city's growth model. If you can't build safely, you shouldn't build at all.
So what are they doing?
They've introduced a good neighbor policy and a construction impact management strategy.
Which sound like boring bureaucratic terms.
They are, but they're fancy ways of saying clean up your mess. They're trying to force developers to act like responsible corporate citizens, using the threat of these remedial action orders to back it all up.
I want to circle back to the people caught in the middle of this. We talk about developers and councils, but the so what here is really about the residents.
That is the tragedy of it. Think about the neighbors at the Gateway project we mentioned earlier. They didn't sign up to live next to an asbestos dump. They were exposed to hazardous waste because a developer wanted to save a few bucks on disposal fees while chasing new investors.
Or the people next to the scene, wondering if their road is going to slide into a pit every time it rains.
It really challenges the popular narrative that red tape is the enemy. In business circles, you always hear about cutting red tape, streamlining the process.
Sure.
But in this case, red tape is the only thing ensuring a fire truck can get to your house.
That's a powerful reframing. We often view regulations as obstacles to progress, but here, they're the baseline for safety.
And when you remove them to get progress faster, you are just deferring the cost. Langford is paying the bill now for the speed of the last 10 years.
The cost wasn't eliminated, it was just pushed into the future.
And now the future is here, and it looks like a giant hole in the ground on Peatt Road.
So, looking ahead, we have this deadline, February 25th, noon.
That's the moment of truth. Will Avantra and Jack Paul mobilize? Will they get crews on site to shore up that wall? Or will the city have to step in and effectively seize control of the remediation?
If the city steps in, that's a huge risk for the taxpayers too, right? Fronting all that money.
It is. It's a massive legal and financial gamble. But the alternative is leaving a dangerous pit next to an occupied building. There's no good choice there.
And there's a town hall shortly after on February 28th.
Yes. And if you're listening to this and you live in the West Shore, specifically near the Peatt or Sunderland corridor, you should probably be there. This is the cleanup phase of an era. It's going to be expensive, it's going to be contentious, and the residents need to have a voice in how it all plays out.
It seems like Langford is the canary in the coal mine for a lot of fast-growing cities.
I think so. It forces us to ask a difficult question. We usually talk about development risk as a financial thing. Will the developer make a profit? Will the bank get paid back?
Right. It's a balance sheet issue, usually involving guys in suits.
But in Langford, the risk wasn't contained to the balance sheet. It was transferred to the community. The residents are the ones living with the rats, the fire hazards, and the crumbling infrastructure. So the final thought I want to leave with you, the listener, is this. When a city pushes for growth at all costs, who is actually underwriting the risk? Is it the developer with the glossy brochure? Or is it the grandmother living next door?
That is a sobering question, and one that I think a lot of cities need to reckon with. We will be watching that deadline on the 25th very closely.
We certainly will. It's going to be a busy week in Langford.
That wraps up this deep dive. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next one.